So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our second session of today's proceedings for the Pentwater Festival. Up next is Paul McGregor. Paul is a mental health campaigner, author, speaker, and founder of Everymind at Work. He has worked with companies such as the Warner Brothers, Lloyds TSB, and the English Football Association. Following Paul's presentation, you can ask some questions, so type them up in the box below. Your questions can be asked at any time and they can be upvoted, and the best questions will be asked at the end, so make sure you get involved. Post on social media using @Pentwater or the hashtag Pentwater Festival. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Paul McGregor.
Thank you very much, Adam. I like the cheering, actually. I like that a lot. So let me just share my screen really quickly. Can I just get a confirmation, Adam, or anyone from the team, that you can see my slides all okay? I've got the chat box open if that's easier.
Looks amazing.
Cool, awesome. Right, so let's start. So thank you all for attending today's session. And really the aim of this session is to change your perspective of mental health, of looking at it in a different way. And the way that I'm going to do that is share my own personal experience, but also give you some strategies that you can take away. Now, typically the questions I always get asked are around how do I support others, right? So I'm going to be talking about how we can support others with their mental health, but really what's important is how do we support ourselves as well, which of course I'm going to be discussing as well. We'll have some time for questions at the end. So if you do want to ask any questions, then feel free to ask them at the end of the session as well. So really, in terms of who I am, as Adam's already said, I'm a campaigner for mental health. I've been doing this for the last couple of years, share my own personal experience on a mission to try and eradicate the stigma around mental health. And as well, recently, over the last couple of months, I launched a platform called Everymind at Work. I've been working on it for about 2 years now. And our aim is to provide anonymous mental health support to employees and at the same time work with businesses to help them improve culture within the workplace. And we do that via an app. So an anonymous app that sits on your employees' phones is discreet. And the reason why we do it that way is because the stigma around mental health still exists. And even though it's getting better, we know that we have to try and break through that stigma. So when it comes to my own personal experience, I think that the only way that we can start this session is to start there. And what led me to talk about mental health and what led me to do the work that I do today. And my journey of mental health was one that I never really thought about for a long time. And what I mean by that is the way that I kind of explain it is growing up, mental illness was here and me and my family were here. And the way that I say that is this, mental illness for me growing up for the first 18 years of my life was what I saw in Hollywood movies. It's what I saw in the newspaper. And the stereotype of mental illness was straitjackets. It was padded cells. It was people that were showing clear signs of distress and really struggling. And I look at my family unit. I look at me. I look at my friends. Playing football, going to school. Whatever it is, and that wasn't a reflection of who I was. So growing up, mental illness never entered my mind. I never even questioned it. Mental health never entered my mind. I never ever questioned it, right? And I'm sure some of you might be able to relate to that. But very sadly, it impacted me when I was 18 years old. And when I was 18 years old, my dad was an amazing man. He had everything on paper. That's the way that I explain it. My dad was an engineer. He was a full-time engineer. My dad had a part-time physiotherapy business that he ran from home. So he went and studied to become a physio. He spent a couple of years doing that and he ran a small practice from home. When I was about 12 years old, my dad went to college and he studied psychology and he got a psychology degree. My dad ran once, if not twice a day. He was also the veteran 1500 meter champion in the UK at some point as well. And friends, family, I've been told on many occasions that my dad used to be called Mr. Perfect. Now, me explaining this man to you, you would never ever know that he was dealing with a mental illness. You would never ever know that he was struggling. And when I was 18, all of that changed overnight. My dad's behaviors changed dramatically. Sometimes the way I want to explain it is his eyes were very distant. He was saying stuff that just didn't really make sense. And we didn't really know what to do, right? But of course, we saw that my dad was in clear distress and he went to the doctors. The doctors then prescribed him antidepressants. They told him that, my dad was struggling with depression. And how do you deal with that? When it comes to mental illness and depression, we aren't educated on it. We're not taught about it. And equally, we're not given a manual when my dad came home that day to say, hey, your dad's struggling with depression, this is what you need to do. We were almost so trusting that, you know, my dad would get better. Now he was on these antidepressants. But a couple of days later, my dad went back. He still wasn't feeling right. They told him to take more antidepressants. And very sadly, a couple of days after that, my dad made an attempt on his life. Now, we're very lucky that that attempt wasn't successful. But you can kind of imagine the shock for us all as a family that here my dad was Mr. Perfect, that had everything on paper, no signs of a mental illness, breaking down all of a sudden, changing behaviors, and, you know, less than 7 days later, making a serious attempt on his life. And if I'm honest with you, I still thought my dad would snap out of it, right? That's my conditioning around mental health. My dad would snap out of it. My dad denied that he tried to take his own life. You know, one of the side effects of antidepressants, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, is suicidal thoughts within the first 2 weeks. So we blamed it on the medication. We all went home and the nightmare was going to be over because that was our conditioning. You can snap out of mental illness and everything will be okay. But hopefully everyone knows mental illness isn't as easy as that. It's far more complex. And my dad struggled. My dad got worse. My dad ended up spending time in a local mental health unit, a psychiatric ward in a local hospital. And he spent a couple of months in there, in and out, in and out. And really, my dad never really seemed to get better. There was times where we thought we'd turn that page and my dad was feeling better. But what my dad was amazing at was what we were all very good at. And that's wearing a mask, you know, wearing that mask, showing us all that he was fine, showing his therapist that he was fine, showing everyone in that unit that he was fine, that inside he was obviously still hurting. And very sadly, on the 4th of March, 2009, I lost my dad to suicide. It was a 6-month battle of, like I say, him getting better, getting worse. And that's where my journey began. How do I deal with this? How do I deal with this as an 18, nearly 19-year-old guy? And how do I deal with suicide? And for me, I didn't deal with it very well, right? That's the only way that I can summarize my whole experience of grief for the first few years is I dealt with it terribly. The way that I dealt with it was that mask. I put that mask on. I wore that mask. I showed all of my friends. I showed everyone around me that I was good. I showed them that I was fine. And then I would sort of cry myself to sleep, right? I would get angry. I would be upset. I would feel guilty. I would feel shame. I would get angry towards my dad. How can my dad ever do this to me, right? Because I had no understanding of suicide. I had no understanding of mental illness. So wearing that mask allowed me to go to a nightclub 6 days after my dad took his own life and just be there with all of my friends pretending that everything was okay. You know, that mask allowed me to walk into the office on a Monday morning, crack jokes, tell everyone that I'm fine. But actually, you know, I would cry the whole way home in my car, right? That mask allowed me to just distract myself from that pain and that emotion that I didn't want to deal with. And, you know, if you've ever worn that mask, you know, you can't wear it for that long, right? It gets exhausting after a while. And there I was sort of 21, 22 years old in a place where I was like, I'm exhausted. I need to do something about this. And very fortunately, I met an amazing lady called Anne, who was a therapist. And she was the first person that I started to speak to about this. And really, that was where my own journey started to begin. You know, when you speak about these emotions that you've suppressed for so long, all of a sudden, now this wound has been exposed. What do I do with it? Do I put a plaster on it or do I try and heal it? And really, it was years and years and years of me consistently going into therapy, consistently learning more about myself, mental health, my dad, how he felt in that last sort of moment. And now sort of, you know, fast forward 11 years, I can sit here and talk about it more openly in the hope of helping others that might be in the situation that my dad was. And kind of just a couple of photos that hopefully you can see on the screen now. My dad, you know, if I look at the top photo in the top left, I believe mental health is very, very, very generational. And we are now seeing more awareness around mental health, which is amazing, right? We're seeing more and more people talk about it. And that's great because we do need to normalize the conversations around mental health, because the photo in the top left, my granddad on the right, my dad in the middle, my nan on the left. My granddad is still alive, 95 years old. He's been through war. My dad was an only child. We lost my dad, obviously, in March 2009. My nan died in April 2009. So my granddad lost his only son and his wife of over 50 years within the space of 30 days. And neither funeral did my granddad cry, right? Neither funeral did my granddad show any emotion. And there we was just watching my granddad saying, he's going to break. He's got to break in a minute. There's no way that he can sustain this traumatic period without showing one shed of a tear. And he never cried. He never showed any emotion. And that served my granddad throughout, you know, the years that he's obviously had to deal with the emotions that he's had to deal with. And then I questioned, how did that impact my dad, right? Growing up, seeing this man, this father figure who doesn't talk about his emotions, he doesn't cry, man up, stiff upper lip. You know, how did that impact my dad in talking about how he felt? And then me and my brother, how do we talk about our emotions based upon our own experiences? And then I'm a dad now with 2 little boys. How do I talk to them about their emotions and mental health? So when we're looking at mental health, of course, it's very generational, and that's something that we need to consider. But the more we can have these conversations now, the better. And what I came to realize is, of course, you know, it might be difficult hearing my story, but we all have mental health. It's hard hearing stories like this, but we've brushed this stuff under the carpet for way too long. And brushing it under the carpet only adds to the stigma, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And we need to start openly addressing these conversations. We need to start talking about mental health, because we all have it. You know, we all have it, and we all have experiences of you know, emotions that we're going to obviously have to experience at some point. So why can we not talk about it? Why do we have to hide it? Because we all have it. And I realized this when I did a talk in a construction company in front of 100 guys that didn't look like guys that wanted to talk about their feelings. And as soon as I spoke about my feelings, I think the power of being vulnerable allows other people to want to talk about theirs. And there I was judging them, saying, here's some guys that don't want to talk about their feelings. And at the end of the session, you know, I had a queue of about 20 or 30 of them come in and talking about their own experiences of depression, of being there on the edge, you know, about to take their own life, of losing people that they've loved within, you know, their space, within their circle. And that was the trigger point for me. I was like, wow, we all have mental health. We all should be able to talk about it. It doesn't make us weak if we can. And one of the biggest problems that I see, and what, you know, I've learned is this reactive approach that we have for mental health. And we can talk about the workplace, we can talk about society, we can talk about the way that we deal with it ourselves. Now, if we're looking at the way that we currently deal with our own mental health, the reactive approach is very simple. What the reactive approach is I'm not going to do anything about my mental health unless I need to. Right. So what I mean by that is I'm going to ignore this feeling of, you know, I'm uneasy, or I'm this anxiety. I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to distract myself, and I'm going to, you know, ignore it for as long as I possibly can. I'm only going to do something about it when I have to. And that's what my dad did, right? You know, that my dad went to the doctors on that day when he was at critical point, when he was feeling suicidal. And how dangerous is that? Same with me. When I was 21, 22, I was in that place that I was so low that I had to do something about it. And this reactive approach is very dangerous. We wait until we're at a point where we have to get that help. And then when we're looking at the workplace or society, the same thing happens again. Let's not do anything about mental health unless we need to, right? How many companies have ignored it until there's an issue, until someone has shown some clear signs of obviously struggling, and then they're like, we better do something for mental health, right? So this reactive approach is very dangerous. And what we're trying to do is move towards a more proactive approach. And sometimes the best way of explaining this is comparing it to physical and mental health. Now, one thing that I dislike doing is comparing physical and mental health, as saying they're both basically the same, right? Because, you know, they're completely different. You know, mental health is far more complex, I would maybe say. If not, I would say mental health is far less research, which means we don't really know much about it. Mental illness is very complex. But one thing that I would say that we can hopefully all agree on is I have physical health, I have mental health. You have physical health, you have mental health. Everyone has physical health and everyone has mental health. And this proactive approach is drummed into us from a very young age when it comes to our physical health. So when I was young, I was told, eat an apple a day and you'll keep the doctor away, right? I was told that I need to make sure I drink enough water, because if I don't drink enough water, I'm going to become physically unwell. I was told that I need to exercise. If I don't exercise, I'm going to become physically unwell. If I don't eat the right foods, if I don't look after the kind of the food that I'm putting into my body, then I'm going to become physically unwell. Right? And we were told to proactively manage our physical health. With mental health, I was told to ignore it unless you need to do something about it, right? And that's the reactive approach. So the proactive approach is very similar to physical health. What can we do proactively to manage our mental well-being that means that we're not reacting when we have to, that means that it's not as dangerous as the current approach that we're now seeing? And when I'm talking all about this, one thing that I do want to point out is just the statistics around it. I'm sure some of you might know, but they do say 1 in 4 people will deal with a mental illness at some point in their life. But the statistics that shock me the most is, you know, suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 45, right? And me saying that, the way that I reframe that is the biggest threat to my life right now, sitting here, is myself. It's my mind, it's depression, it's suicide, it's mental health. So if that's the biggest threat to my life right now, and statistics can prove that, why am I not doing something about it? Why am I not proactively managing it to stop me from getting to that place? You know, suicide's the biggest killer of young people as well. And of course, you know, in the current situation that we're in right now, if we're looking at old sort of patterns of the last recession and the suicide rates after, you know, it's a very scary situation right now. So we need to focus on this approach of being proactive. And again, one of the reasons why I think we forget to do this is it's very individual. You have to find what works for you. And you have to, you know, find the coping strategies, the non-negotiables. What is it that you do for yourself, and how do you implement that into your day-to-day routine? And really it is as simple as that, choosing your non-negotiable. And you can probably see there's a lot of options here. And you might just want to write it down, or you might just want to sort of, you know, think about it right now. But what do you do on a daily or a weekly basis that makes you feel good about your mental health, right? What makes you feel good, that makes you feel, you know, that changes your mood. And there's a lot of these that you can do. You know, for one, journaling's a great exercise, you know, writing down whatever's going on in your mind. That helped me massively early on, even though it was a bit strange. I felt like I was writing a diary. But what journaling allowed me to do was write down what was going on in here. It then makes it almost seem like it's someone else's problems, and I can look down on those problems and I can rationalize them and figure them out. And that for me was massively helpful. So journaling, exercise, is different sort of, you know, exercise is very broad. Specific terms of exercise, what do you do in terms of exercise? For me, running is very helpful, like long distance running at the moment. I'm currently training for 8 marathons in 8 days in 8 cities to raise money for a mental health charity. And that's to highlight the fact that 1 in 8 children now have a diagnosed mental illness, and try and bring awareness to that. And at the same time, train teachers when it comes to mental health. So of course, long distance running is very good for me at the moment, but it could be weightlifting, it could be HIIT training, it could be, you know, yoga. There's so many different things that would work individually for you. Nutrition, talking, therapy, escapism, hobbies, helping others, mindfulness, acceptance, reading, support groups, people breathing. There's so much here that we can do. But really what you need to do is figure out what works for you and implement that into your own toolbox. What is it that you do on a daily basis that's just for you, that's proactively managing your mental health to make sure that you're, you know, looking after yourself and making sure that you prioritize self-care and don't look at self-care as a luxury. So of course it's very individual. So you have to find what works for you. There's no point me telling you this is what helps me, because you have to find out what works for you. On that note as well, I always share the story of, I was reading an article that said puzzles are great for anxiety. And me and my wife bought an 1,000-piece puzzle, and within a minute, my mental health was declining, right? I was angry, I was frustrated, I was annoyed because I couldn't find 2 pieces out of these 1,000 pieces. My wife, on the other hand, it was a very mindful activity for her, right? You know, she did this puzzle, and, you know, she said it really helped sort of calm her down, keep her mind off it. And that's what mindfulness really is. So with me, give me a 6-piece Peppa Pig puzzle and I'm good to go. But give me a 1,000-piece puzzle, it's not very good for my mental health. So it's so individual, and you have to find what works for you and add that into your toolbox. And really, before we move on to how do we support others, you know, if we ignore our mental health, you can almost compare it to a Coke bottle. If you can imagine just shaking up a Coke bottle, and we all know what happens if you continue to shake up a Coca-Cola bottle and then you open up the lid, it explodes. You know, really, when we're looking at our mental health, if we're shaking up our Coca-Cola bottle, that's waking up in the morning and maybe you don't feel very good. Then you get an email from a client that's, you know, really annoyed you. And then all of a sudden you've got lots of work, a massive to-do list that you're doing. And all of this is building up, this stress is building up. If we don't relieve that, you'll know that we can still open up that Coca-Cola bottle no matter how much we've shaken it. And it's about slowly releasing that pressure. And that's all about the non-negotiables that you do on a daily basis. So think about this after this webinar. You know, what's causing you stress and what are you going to do to help relieve that pressure? Just seen a question come in. I know we're going to answer questions at the end with Kathy. How do I find my interests? For me, Kathy, it was about trying as much as I possibly could at that time. I almost kind of say, you know, become a bit of a scientist in the fact of, you know, try different therapists or try different books or, you know, try different hobbies, try different things, see what works for you individually. And when you know that, you can obviously do more of that one thing that helps. Now, when we're talking about the stigma, and you can talk about the stigma at work or in society, the stigma has a massive impact on how we deal with mental health. Let's be honest, the stigma still exists. Awareness is increasing, but the stigma still exists. You know, if we're talking about the stigma, we feel alone, we don't want to seek help, we fear that we're going to lose our relationships or our jobs. You know, just have, you know, say it in your mind if you want, but if you was going for a job promotion 3 weeks later and 3 weeks before that, you went to your manager and you told them that you was really struggling with anxiety, do you believe that open, honest conversation about your anxiety would hinder you the chance of getting that job promotion? Whenever I ask that question in companies, I'll get a am I going to lose my relationships? And this is what the stigma does to people dealing with their mental health. And when we're looking at the stigma, our language is really important as well. How many people have said, man up, you're mental, it's just a blip. You've got nothing to worry about. This isn't people doing it in a nasty way. It's just that we're not educated on mental health. The stigma has meant that we see people struggling with mental illness as weak, but in reality, they're human, right? So when we're saying you've got nothing to worry about, that kind of language doesn't help people that are struggling with their mental health. And this is language that we use every single day, and unconsciously the lack of education around mental health has been this key factor behind the existing stigma. What we see in the media also has an impact on that. And I'm not perfect, right? I made a mistake with OCD about 3 or 4 years ago when I first started to share my story. There I was talking in front of, I think it was about 100 odd people in the US in Atlanta. And this was the first time that I spoke about mental health. And I made a joke, and it's on YouTube, right? I said, if you've got OCD, you're going to hate these slides because there was 2 dates that are out of alignment. And I just started going on with the presentation about how mental health is important, right? And I look at that now and I cringe because I made a huge error there. I made a huge mistake. And it's only because since then, my understanding, my education around OCD as an illness has dramatically changed. My partner in Everymind at work, he has OCD, and getting to know him and getting to know the ins and outs of the illness makes me realize, wow, it's far more than I ever was educated on. For me, OCD was, I was educated that it meant that you was very clean, but that's the complete myth in terms of what OCD is. So really, that's my lack of education. I stigmatize those with OCD. I made mistakes. And it's only through my own, willingness to educate myself on mental illness and mental health that meant that I can start to change my language. And even the word commit, how many people would say we commit suicide? And we still say it. And there's a big campaign at the moment to try and stop us from saying it, because the word commit comes from the fact that suicide was once a crime, right? Suicide was once a crime. So we commit murder, we commit burglary, we commit suicide. So the word commit came from the fact that suicide was once a crime, even though suicide was, of course, decriminalized. I think it was 1961. Right. So when we're talking about the stigma in the workplace or outside of the workplace, it's judgment of someone maybe going to therapy. It's fear of job loss, if you're being honest about mental health challenges. It's unconscious shaming of someone that might be struggling with their mental health. It's that lack of openness of people not wanting to talk about how they feel, and that very silent culture that we're all very used to, that means that if I talk about how I feel, I'm different. I'm alone. I'm the only one dealing with this. But when we've got an open culture and we're seeing other people share their stories, I feel comfortable to talk about mine too as well. So we really need to address the stigma at first, because if we don't talk about the stigma, everyone's going to continue to suffer in silence. And we all have a role associated with challenging the stigma. And that's our language, that's educating ourselves, that's being okay with vulnerability yourself and knowing that that vulnerability is strength, it isn't a weakness. It's catching yourself before judgment. And it's also normalizing conversations that you have at work. Now, I'm really conscious of time, guys, so I just quickly want to go through this and I'll answer any questions that you've got. When we're talking about supporting someone else, you can scrap employee here. You can talk about friend, family member, stranger. One of the questions I always get asked is, how do I support someone else? Now, this is coming from my own personal experience. What I've learned is ask, listen, signpost. Ask, listen, signpost is a simple thing for us all to remember about having conversations with more people that might be struggling. And when it comes to ask, listen, signpost, it sounds very simple, but sometimes we don't have the confidence to ask because we don't want to go and speak to that person in case they tell us how they're truly feeling. So we never even start the process. We don't ask, we don't listen, we don't signpost. At the same time, if we do ask and then we listen, we feel like it's our responsibility to solve their problems. So we then become therapists, we don't signpost. One, I didn't ask my dad because I didn't want to hear the answers that he was going to give me. I was protecting myself. I didn't want to hear my dad say that he felt like he was going to take his own life, right? So I didn't ask. At the same time, if he did start telling me, I would try and solve his problems. I would try and go to solutions and I would try and, solve it for him. And when we're looking at ask, it's about noticing behavior changes of people. Are we seeing their behavior changes, dramatically changing, or are they subtle behavior changes? There's never a right way of knowing if someone's struggling, but they always say behavior changes is the key part. If we can see behavior changes, then we can obviously address it. Don't overcomplicate the ask. It could be, are you okay? You know, but the key thing is there, number 3, ask twice. Because if I said to you, how are you? I'm sure the response is going to be, I'm fine, right? So asking twice is, I could have said to my dad, Dad, are you okay? And my dad said, yeah, I'm fine. And I might have said, it's just that I know you've been going through a lot recently with Nan and obviously changing jobs. I know I'm your son. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but is everything okay? Now, that second question has shown a couple of things. It's shown compassion. It's shown that I'm giving you space. I'm willing to sit here and listen. And it isn't a how are you throwaway comment of, you know, hey, how are you? I don't really want to know the answer. So that asking twice is really important. If we can remember that on that second question, we're typically maybe going to get that person to open up. If they don't open up, if my dad said, Paul, stop psychoanalyzing me, I'm fine, go away, then that's fine as well. I've asked, I've noticed behavior changes, I've tried, and he also knows that I'm equally caring if he does want to talk about it as well. If my dad did start telling me how he felt, he was telling me about the distress, what was going on in his mind. For me, it's about 100% listening. I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to judge my dad. I just want to listen to him. I want to give him that space. And one tip that I can give you with this is awkward silences. If my dad starts to talk and he starts to tell me how he felt, you see how awkward that silence was just then? That then encourages my dad to continue talking. That then encourages him to maybe continue talking about how he feels. And it's happened so many times as well over the last couple of years since I've been doing this. People continue to talk and talk and talk, and then they say, I don't know why I'm telling you all of this, right? And really it's that zero judgment, is avoid interrupting, and it's 100% listening. But this is the key one, signposting. I have to remember my role isn't a therapist. I have to remember that whatever my dad's telling me, I'm giving him that space, I'm giving him that time to listen to him. But at the same time, this is something that I need to try and get someone else involved to help him with. And I need to remember that my role isn't therapist. So I need to signpost to professional support. I need to signpost to the people that I know that can help my dad and support him with that. And really, there's so many out there. There's a couple on this slide. I'm happy to share these slides with you as well if you want. But Shout is a tech service that you can use. Calm has got a hotline as well. Papyrus has got a hotline. Samaritans, and of course, if in crisis, 999. Your company might have internal support that you can offer. It's really about being confident that I know where I can potentially signpost someone to if they are struggling. And if I have that confidence, I can ask more, I can listen more, and I can signpost more. And that means I can have more conversations as well. So every conversation and every situation is different. There's no one size fits all approach here. I wish there was, but we have to remember that every conversation and every situation is different. And we have to start more conversations by asking twice. We have to remember to focus on compassion and not solutions. What I mean by that is I said to my dad on so many occasions, Dad, you've got nothing to be depressed about. Let's just go for a run. Dad, you've got nothing to be depressed about. Let's go for a beer. Everything will be fine. I was trying to solve my dad rather than show him the compassion that you might have needed at that time. Knowing where your responsibility ends, knowing that you can only support them and not control them, it is really down to them. And asking yourself, what's the alternative? If I don't speak to this person because I'm scared of what they might say, what is the alternative? That will then try and persuade us to have more conversations and normalize the conversation around mental health as well. So just to kind of wrap up, I believe it's 1 in 1. I talk about the statistic of 1 in 4 people struggle with mental health. I kind of want to eradicate that. It's true, but when we're talking about 1 in 4, I'm judging myself if I'm the 1 in 4, and I'm also looking for that 1 in 4, right? It's 1 in 1. Everyone here listening today has mental health. Everyone here listening today has a story, has faced adversity, has had to deal with emotions, especially during this difficult time. And struggling with your mental health, it doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And that's something that it took me a long time to realize that, right? As a guy from Essex, it takes me a long time to realize that. But, you know, me sharing my story today does not make me weak. It makes me human. And really, hopefully people can, you know, take something from that and know that it's okay to talk about how they feel as well. I'll leave that there, but if you want to find out more about Everymind, go to everymindAtwork.com. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. I know there's a couple that have come in, Adam, in the Q&A.
Yeah, let's jump straight into that, Paul. So first of all, we've got quite a few questions, and I'll kick off with this one. I have mental health and feel anxious about entering the creative industry. What tips would you give to a student looking for work and dealing with mental health, and how do I overcome imposter syndrome?
Really big question, really big question. I think with that, we've just done some content actually with a guy called Michael Stevens, and he was a creative in, so he worked for Virgin Media, he's worked for a lot of companies, Ted Baker, and he talked about burnout as a creative. So Catherine, I'd be happy to send that video to you if you want to see that. But I think as well, it's kind of just focusing on yourself, focusing on your mental health, you know, giving yourself some time to focus on it every single day. And I think with imposter syndrome, it's so common, it's more common than you might realize. And I think, you know, being a perfectionist is maybe something that you are. So it's maybe addressing that as well. But Catherine, I can put my email up. If you want to drop me an email, I'll send you that video.
And we can also pop anything like that, Paul, into the notes. We're going to be sharing your presentation on demand in the next few days, and we can add that. Got some really good questions here, so I'll go on to the next one. Once you find the thing that helps you escape, i.e. running or drawing, how do you manage not becoming too obsessed in doing that and with the thing that you're using to cope with, you know, your anxiety or depression?
It's a really good question, something that I've been thinking about recently as well, right? Because my dad, as I explained, my dad ran every day. My dad meditated. My dad read self-help books. My dad did all of this. But what I come to realize is they are plasters for something that we aren't dealing with as well. So I think it is that, you know, my dad was very obsessed with running as an example. And I think that obsession came from the fact that he was running away from something probably a lot deeper that none of us knew about. So I'm a big advocate for therapy. I think it's about finding the right therapist, but trying to get to the root problems as well as doing the coping strategies too. So like I say, you know, those non-negotiables are good. They make you feel better. That you can proactively manage your mental health. But if there's something deeper going on, you need to get to the root cause as well.
Okay, great advice. When someone comes to you to share their feelings because they might not be feeling mentally well, if you're not a professional therapist or have a great understanding, how can you help them?
I think it is just giving them that space. I think a lot of people neglect the power in just listening, right? So it's not about how can I help them? How can I solve them? How can I make them better? It's about how can I give them that space to talk about how they're feeling. So it's not always about this, as I say, the solutions. It's more about giving them that space. So I think don't put pressure on yourself to try and cheer them up, to make them feel better. That really does come down to them, but focus on giving them that space, that time to listen, letting them know that you're there, showing them that they're compassion. That's really what I would focus on.
Okay, great. I think we've got time for a few more. Do you have any books that you can recommend? And I did say at the beginning, you're an author and I've read a few of your books. So yeah, have you got any others that you can recommend?
Yeah, sure. So you can read My Man Up, Man Down, right? You can get that from Amazon, which is just the story in more detail. I've read loads of books. I was very drawn towards more sort of, and I don't like I wouldn't call them spiritual books, but I really like Eckhart Tolle. So he's got a couple of books called Power of Now, A New Earth. I really like the book Susan Jeffries, I think it is, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Been recently reading a lot of books by Dr. Wayne Dyer as well. So I've got lots of books I could recommend, but I would say the ones that really, really help the most are Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Great. Amazing. Paul, you've been absolutely fantastic today. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your advice and guidance. And, you know, we work with some of the biggest design agencies and brands across the world. And, you know, this time during COVID has been exceptionally challenging, and you coming on and doing this has been extremely helpful. So I want to thank you and give you a huge round of applause for doing this. Thanks, Paul. We're going to talk about our next speaker now. So up next is John Glasgow, ECD and co-founder at Vault 49, doing a presentation called Black People, You Belong Here. Trust me, it's going to be very powerful, and we will be talking about that imposter syndrome in a little bit more in detail. So we'll see you back sharp at 3 p.m. BST. Take care, and thanks again, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.